Right on, my handsome. So we're going to do a little video today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the harnesses. Can't do a stream today, so I'm going to make a video instead because I'm having a few issues with some of my screens. I think one of my cables is gone pear-shaped. So what's going to happen is I'm going to talk to you a little about the PT Actuator Tension R. This hasn't been sponsored. It's not been linked to anybody. Little film on there, look. Let's take that off. Might improve the picture. Right, it's not been sponsored. This has been a product that I've purchased with my own money. So my views and opinions are my own. So let's get into this and talk about the Tension R. So it's a belt tension system that's actually made by a company called PT Actuator. They're, I believe, a Chinese company, but they have got they've got a company or a branch in the UK, and they make full motion platforms and motion simulator rigs. And amongst that, they make this belt rig. Essentially, it's a motor that bolts to the back of your rig, so you need profile aluminium rig. They do 160 or 80 mil brackets for the rig, and it bolts to the back of your chassis, and then belts come up through the top, through the belt hoops, and fasten with a 5-point harness. There's videos explaining basically what it does, how it works, on a guy called Carl Gosling. He does a really good one, and Sim Racing Garage, he does a real in-depth look at it, and it's a stripped down. I'm just going to tell you what I think about it as a product and go through a little bit about the software, because it doesn't appear that there's been much in the way of stuff done on the software. So I'll do a quick little talk about the software stuff and we'll go from there. So I've got the video camera on me, so you can see the front of the belts and the camera at the back. Get my fingers pointing in the right direction. So got those ones pointing back there. Now, the belts have to be set up correctly. If you can see the little tiny black spots, those little black spots that are on the belt, I can't reach them, but these little black spots that are here, they are metal stoppers. They have to be mounted sufficiently far away from the box itself, because if it's not mounted on the box, if they're too close to the box, when the belts pull in, when the belts pull down, basically those stoppers hit the box frame and they start to damage and deform the belt. I know this because that's the mistake I made. I thought I had it all adjusted up, and through adjusting and manoeuvring the seat and the position of the belts, they slowly got further and further and further down, and there was no real need for them to be that far down, and it did just catch the frame, so it slightly deformed the belt, but I've resolved that. That's no problem. Lesson learned, and that's something that needs to be sort of highlighted a little more, I believe, because the instructions for the assembly aren't amazing. Some of it I had to work out myself. As far as fitting's concerned, they're quite easy to fit. When you purchase them, you supply, you get asked for whether you want 160 or 80. Of course, my rigs are 160, so I ordered the 160 brackets. Essentially, all I did was unbolt the back board, so the very end panel, pulled that off, bolted the tensioner on, made sure that it was central, put the bracket back on, and tightened it all up. That was easy. It took no time at all to get it actually assembled. T-nuts and bolts are all supplied, and it comes with the T-nuts and bolts for the side belts and the groin belt. Yeah, the actual setting up of it was a bit of a pain in the backside as far as the USB side of things was concerned. They only give you a very short USB cable, which isn't ideal. They do seem to have modified the USB port from what it used to be. It used to be, I believe, a micro USB. So it used to be that style connector. It's now like a traditional printer style USB cable. So the sort of thing that you would use to actually plug in your button boxes, your like Fanatec hardware, pedals, all of that sort of stuff. So quite a substantial USB cable now. It comes with a 90-degree connector for the power cable. The power brick is quite large and the cable for that is quite long. However, the USB cable was less than a meter, I believe, which really isn't sufficient when you consider the power is at the other side of my rig, because I'm essentially emulating right-hand drive. All my gear shifters are on the left, so all of my access is on the right. So all of my rig is wired and plumbed in down one side and across to the PC. The PC is mounted away from the rig. So to have the length to go across, I've had to buy a second cable to plumb that in. Other than that, that was alright. I had a few issues getting it to connect to the piece of software. So if I can bring the piece of software into view, that is the software. The software is pretty straightforward. You're first met with a set of displays on the right that tells you all of the hardware that's connected. As I say, PT Actuator, they do full motion rigs and platforms, including haptics and wind, shakers, all of that sort of stuff. So there's a purchase version of the software. For the belts, you do not need the purchase version because it comes as standard with the as part of the project, so to speak. It's quite simple to use. There are a couple of things you have to do in the setup. So as far as the setup's concerned, you go to your hardware, you would scroll down, you would find belt, so belt icon, you enable it, do an auto search for the COM port. I had trouble with this. I had to set it to a COM port, and then after that I managed to set it to auto and it started to find what I needed it to find. There's a couple of things for calibration and belt tension under calibration, so the power of how much the belt pulls when you calibrate the belt. So if I just show you that now, I've got a button mapped, because there are mappings that you can use for the system. So I've got a button mapped for my calibration. You press the calibration button and the belts tighten up and then they slacken. These sliders, they do determine how powerful the tension pull is and how much the belt relaxes after that calibration process. They are quite snug, and they do need to be, otherwise you don't feel the benefits. There's a belt test, so there's a test you can do. We can't do that right at the moment because I'm in game, which then allows you to do your tensioning fine tuning. The first thing you come to is surge. So the surge is how much the belts relax and tighten when the vehicle's moving forward and under braking. So obviously you accelerate hard, the belts slacken ever so slightly. You brake hard, they tighten up and pull you back into the seat. It's reversed to what would happen in real life, because obviously the seat is static. The seat doesn't move, so the belts kind of are mirroring what the seat would be doing or the vehicle would be doing on the track. There is the strength on the first line. So the first line would be your surge strength. Now I've not found anything that I need higher than 10 so far, which is halfway setting. 10 is more than adequate to give anybody a really decent compression of the tension on the belts. Then you've got the smoothing. The smoothing is basically to tell you that determines how quickly it reacts. So if you've got micro movements, the surging or the surge smoothing, the higher up that number, they recommend no higher than 15, I believe, which is where the default setting is. It just removes some of the micro movements to make it a more progressive and more sort of linear movement. So I've worked out that for race cars essentially like the Porsche that I'm going to be showing you in a minute, they need a lower level because obviously they're hard sprung, they've got really strong braking effort, so the vehicle is going to be slowing down really significantly, and it's going to be accelerating quite significantly, so you want a lot more micro movements in the belt. It's my personal preference. That's how I've sort of found how I like this to feel. So we're going down to the next one, which is sway. So obviously sway is your left and right G-forces. Your left and right G-forces are again mirrored. So when you're going around a right-hand bend, the left-hand belt is pulling in. Going to the left-hand bend, the right-hand belt is pulling in. And again, micro movements and how quickly it sort of pulls in and reacts to the movement of the vehicle on the road is all subjective again. But I found race cars, particularly race cars like GT3s and single seaters especially, you bring that smoothing down, gives you more micro movements, makes you feel a little bit more connected to the vehicle. And heave is the motion of up and down in the vehicle. So as the cars say compressing and decompressing the suspension, that is heave. That again, in a heavy or really stiffly sprung car, you're going to feel a lot more of the actual micro movements of the vehicle, and the belts are going to replicate that. So what I'm going to do is we'll quickly just grab that and move that up out of the way, and we'll go on the track so that you can see what's going on. Right, so we're at Brands Hatch. We're just going to go round. As you can see, the belts are starting to twitch and tweak. Obviously I'm not watching where I'm going, I'm watching the video footage because I'm an idiot. So where there's elevation change, as you come over the rise of any elevation change, obviously the belts slacken and they tighten as the suspension compresses, and you'll be able to see them, they work in tandem. So for heave, in general, they would probably work in tandem. For sway, they're going to work independently. And for the surging, they're probably going to work in tandem. So as you can see there, down into the dip, as the car reaches the bottom of the dip and it compresses, that belt's tightened right up. And I don't know if you can see it on this cam, but they do pull quite significantly. Oh, I've got an itchy nose, it's terrible. Right. As you can see, they're quite powerful. And this is only on 10. This is the setting, power setting that they come at from the software from the get-go. So we'll do another lap and then we'll talk about some of the pitfalls that I've come across that may be to do with me being stupid, maybe, or maybe it just could have done with a bit better of explanation in the instructions. From the manufacturer. As you can see there, through Dingledale, the rise and the fall of the track generates rise and fall of the belts. So yeah, that's basically how the belts are working and interacting with the vehicle. Must excuse me, I do have to keep poking me nostrils because my nose is bloody itching me for some reason. So yeah, there were a few pitfalls that I found. Covered some of that in when I was setting it up. So we've talked about the detection for the USB wasn't brilliant. It didn't pick it up straight away. I tried several different USB ports that I know work fine on the rig. So that was a bit of an issue. The other thing that there is, I will bring the thing back into display, is you can save your presets. So when you're, at the moment I'm in Content Manager. So obviously if you're in game going straight through into your thing and you're not using Content Manager, so for Assetto Corsa Competizione, when you're in game and you press the calibration button, and I think it stays there until you change the vehicle. So every time you go in on Competizione, because it's really the only other game that I've tried it against, the software doesn't have to be calibrated every time you start a race. It's only if you change the vehicle. In Content Manager, what I've discovered is that every time you come out or in or out of a race in Content Manager, and it goes back to the Content Manager screen, you have to recalibrate the belts because it switches off and switches back on again. It's not a big problem. It's kind of why I've mapped a button for the calibration onto my button box. What else did I find that was a bit of a pain in the backside? Not a lot. The only other thing that I can mention that is a problem, but it's not a problem, it's very subjective, it's how it pulls through the hoops. On my rig, I don't know that you'll be able to see it unless I exit out of here. When I exit, the belts should relax. There you go, the belts have relaxed. So if I just release that, you see these bits of white plastic that I've put on the hoops. So I've put those pieces of white poly pipe in there because they pull really, really low on my shoulders. I'm 5'10", so I'm not really tall, but I'm not really short either. And they were kind of pulling like down on my shoulders rather than back. PT Actuator China sell a jig or a framework that sits behind the seat that the belts travel through with a set of rollers. I'm in the middle of trying to get one of these rigs purchased from PT Actuator UK. They're trying to accrue all the parts to be able to build one for me, so that I can basically purchase it. They weren't aware of the tower, even though they're part of PT Actuator, and PT Actuator is on their main website. So that was a little confusing, but they're in the process, like I say, of sorting out the rollers and stuff. That allows the belts to pull cleanly, so you've got the hoop to pull cleanly through the hoop and then pull back on your shoulders rather than pulling down, because what you find is it pulls down, and after a while, because there's quite a heavy pull, you do end up feeling quite exhausted, which I guess you would if you were in a real race car. I'm not in a real race car, I'm in a shed. I'm in a shed in the middle of Cornwall, so I don't want to feel really exhausted by the time I'm finished. Obviously I want to know that I've been in the rig and I want to know that I've had fun, but I don't want to be feeling absolutely shattered by the time I've finished. Other than that, it is absolutely amazing. The realism, not that I've ever been in a real race car, but the realism is the wrong word, the immersion that it gives you, in that you feel connected to the car. I've got a 4-shaker system, so I've already got bumps and bangs, and I've tried it with those switched off. Without the shakers on, it feels a little sterile, but you've still got the pulling. So if you didn't have a shaker system, it would still offer a high level of immersion into your sim, but I would say that to have it in tandem with a shaker system of sorts, even if you only had, say, dual shakers and they were under the seat, I mean, I've got one on each corner of the rig, so they offer the suspension shifts and movements tied with the belt tension. It makes quite a difference to how alive the rig feels. Now, again, it's all subjective, and it's all subjective according to price. The price was just over £1,000, so it was £1,015 UK, or pounds sterling. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. I would say a lot of development's gone into making it do what it's supposed to do. I don't believe you could build something as good as it for less than that. I've seen some DIY stuff on the internet and on YouTube where they use like fuel flap actuators to pull on the belts. Now, I can safely say those actuators, they'll pull on the belts, but they are not ever going to reach the limits that this will give you. If you aren't in the market for a full motion rig, because if you've got a full motion rig, you've got heave, you've got sway, and you've got surge already built into it. You need static belts. They will do exactly the same thing from a full motion belt, full motion rig, without a tensioner. If you've got a static rig, the tensioner is, in my view, it is absolutely brilliant. It's, without shadow of a doubt, one of the biggest smile inducers that I've put on my setup, bar none. You know, when I bought my first Fanatec wheel, I was like, feel it, it's amazing. Then when I bought the shakers, it was like, feel it, it's amazing. My shakers, they're a DIY set. I knocked them up myself from components that I purchased off Amazon, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. But for smiles per pound, the Tensioner has given me more smiles than I can imagine, because it is so immersive. You just feel like you're in the car. I'm not saying everyone can go out and buy £1,000 worth of belt tension. I just happen to have a really understanding wife, but I couldn't justify a full motion platform, and this is as close as I'm going to get to full motion. I don't have the room for full motion, so this is the very next best thing, and it is absolutely spot on. And that's about all I can say, is that it is fantastic. So if you've got £1,000, say £1,020 to throw at your sim rig, and you've got a aluminium profile rig, and you're looking for the next thing to make you feel like you're in a race car, then the Tensioner belt kit is probably the one. That would be the one thing I would say put on if you've already got a decent wheel set up. I mean, I've got the Fanatec CSL Elite. It's not direct drive or any of that stuff, but as it stands, it was a choice between the direct drive wheel and the belt kit, and I chose the belt kit because I was closer to having the money for the belt kit than the direct drive set, because I want to go DD1 or DD2, not the small direct drive system. And I'm glad I did, because it is absolutely astonishingly great. Like I say, I'm not being paid to say this. They've not given me this kit. I've bought this kit out of my own money, and it's made a big difference to my sim racing. So really, that's about all I can say on the situation. If you've got any questions, just feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll answer any questions that I can, and we'll go from there. So, right on, peeps. Cheers and gone. Thanks for watching.